Thank you everyone for coming. I'm Adria Torralba. I'm a PhD candidate at the Open University of Catalonia. And today I'm here to present my most recent research, which is about breaking rollups and how sequencer design shapes your L2's attack surface. And this is a joint work with Muoy Tran, which is at the Chalmers University of Technology in Gothenburg in Sweden. 1 year ago, I stayed there for 3 months doing a research stay, and we mixed my expertise on rollups with his expertise on network attacks to come up with his study. And also, Cristina Perez-Solá is my PhD supervisor, and it's also part on this study. So, before diving into that, let me explain who I am. I'm a PhD candidate on applied, and I'm doing a PhD on applied cryptography on blockchain. And recently, I've been working as a zero-knowledge cryptographer and blockchain security researcher at OpenZeppelin. And my research focus are on zero-knowledge cryptography and proving systems. Also, I'm really interested on Ethereum and Rollups security. Today, I'm here to talk about that. And also, I'm really interested on the uses of cryptography to improve privacy and censorship resistance online. And also, I would like to tell you one more thing about me. That is that on my free time, I dance Lindy Hop. And I'm really happy because yesterday, the ETH Prague organization had a wonderful idea to mix the ETH Prague opening party with social dance, swing Lindy Hop in Prague. And I had the chance of dancing a little bit with the crowds here, which was amazing. I haven't danced in Prague yet. Yeah, but back to the topic. This is the outline for the presentation today. I will start presenting the motivation for this study. Then I will explain briefly how do rollups work. And then I'm going to present the 2 main contributions of this article, which is the first one is we come up with a taxonomy of the different rollup architectures in terms of sequencers. And the second contribution is on that taxonomy of the sequencers architectures, we present and propose which are the network attacks that are more feasible or are more probable to be happening depending on this taxonomy. And finally, I will draw some conclusions on that. So, it just stopped working that, so. The motivation. Why do we need this study? Ethereum was not scaling properly, and well, we had years ago, Ethereum was really slow and was not competent enough with traditional payment systems, let's say Visa, which processes way more transactions per second on average. When Ethereum got congested, we have a problem because with high demand, it comes high gas fees and slow confirmation times. However, the problem about that is the problem why do we have this setup is because we have what's known as the blockchain trilemma, which says that you cannot achieve simultaneously scalability while maintaining security and decentralization. But to solve that, we have shifted the Ethereum roadmap to adopt a rollup-centric roadmap. And in this setup, we are using L1 as a secure settlement and as data availability layer, and we are keeping the off-chain, the heavy computation part of the transactions on L2 systems. So we use that cheaper systems to perform the computation, and we use L1 as a settlement and data availability layer. And rollups, to be fair, have emerged as the dominant L2 paradigm to solve this issue. Because if we look at the metrics, we see over $35 billion in total value locked right now. And it is estimated that around 65% of all the Ethereum ecosystem transactions are processed through some kind of rollup. But with high stakes comes high risk. And I want you to see that. I'm pretty sure that you cannot see anything, but I will explain what it is. These are the top 100 most lucrative hacks that happen on L2. The source is from rec.news. And here we can see the number 1 up to, I don't see that, but number 10 and number 100. And now, in orange, you see highlighted the hacks that happen in 2023, in blue, 2024, in green, 2025, and in red, 2026. We even see right over there the KelpDAO recent hack. So, the motivation for this study at the end of the day is with this landscape where the most relevant hacks are happening really recently. We think that we had to contribute to the community by studying what's going on, what can go wrong, what can go good, and to present this systematic study. So the contributions for this article are 2. The first one is we want to present a taxonomy of the Ethereum Rollups architecture based on the sequencer design. And the second one is a security analysis of the different attack surfaces that this different architecture sequencer design enables on each class. But before doing that, let me briefly explain how a rollup works. This is a figure summarizing how the transaction workflow of a rollup more or less looks like. And I suppose that you can see that in red. OK. So the journey begins when an L2 user wants to send an L2 transaction. And what usually he does is it submits that to a set of relayers that usually run by the same company that the rollup is running, or by some third party that is also running these relayers. The relayers take these transactions and send that to the sequencer. And the sequencer is the rollup itself, the L2. This is another chain built on top of a layer 1 chain. The sequencer handles the transaction, from taking the transaction from the RPC, to order the transaction, to execute the transaction, to compress the result of the transaction, to send the data availability to L1, and to send the data to the prover to create a zero-knowledge proof in the case of a zero-knowledge rollup, or to provide with some kind of fraud-proof mechanism in the case of optimistic rollups. And once all this process is done in the L2 world, then we have an interaction with the L1 world. In our case, this will always be an Ethereum network, and typically the sequencer on L2 interacts with the rollup smart contract or contracts that are deployed on L1. So with that, let me present the first contribution, which is a taxonomy of the rollup architecture types in terms of the sequencer design. We have identified 3 different sequencer architectures, being the first one what we call the standalone sequencer, which is simply a single sequencer, a single trusted operator that handles everything, from taking the transaction, to order that, to execute that, to post the data availability, to being responsible to send the data to the prover to create a zero-knowledge proof, etc. And here we also wanted to highlight a variant, which is the high availability variant. And in this case, instead of having a single replica of this single sequencer, we have n centralized sequencers synchronized all together, usually behind a CDN for load balance purposes. And here, interestingly, we have another actor, which is the coordinator, that is responsible to handle the synchronization between the replicas and to decide which replica is the active one at any given moment, for instance. The second architecture, pipeline sequencer. In this case, we have split this single all-powerful sequencer into different actors. We have a sequencer that takes the transactions and orders them. We have an entity that is only responsible for generating the trace. We have a conflator that usually compresses the result, and the conflator sends that to the coordinator that is responsible for a prover or a set of provers to generate the proofs. With that, what we want? It decouples the transaction latency from the proof latency, in the sense that we have near instant self-confirmation. Because if you rely in this set of actors, usually centralized actors, then you can have near instant self-confirmation, and you can continue right away placing transactions on top of non-settled transactions on L1. The last architecture, distributed sequencer. And here we have a committee of n independent sequencers that are running some kind of coordination via a Byzantine fault-tolerant consensus mechanism or a proof-of-stake rotation. What's cool about that is that since we have n independent sequencers, we are more resilient against liveness attacks, since we don't rely on a single operator for the liveness of the L2. Well, having said that, let's move to the second contribution, which is about the security analysis of all the attacks that we thought that are possible from a network point of view, given these architectures that I just presented. For the attacks, we have classified them on 3 different phases. Okay? The first phase is attacks that may be happening before the transaction submission. This only involves typically the L2 user and the relayers. So attacks here will be tightly related to RPC access, RPC censorship, and this kind of attacks. The second is during the transaction processing. Here, depending on the architecture that we have of the sequencer, we have different kind of attacks. And lastly, we have attacks that may be possible after the batch is submitted to L1. So here you can see the summary table of what we have found. And let me go slowly over this table. The first column is the phase. Before the transaction, during the transaction, or before the processing, during the processing, after the processing. This second column corresponds to the threat or the network attack that we consider possible. And here, at the end, we have 3 different columns. And SA stands for standalone architecture, PL for pipeline, and DS for distributed. And a black dot means that this attack is directly applicable in this case. A partially filled dot means that this attack is partially applicable, and a dash means that this attack does not make any sense in this setup. With that, for attacks before the processing, as I said, we have attacks related to the RPC availability and censorship. If an actor, a malicious actor, is trying to censor your access to the RPC, and you have a single standalone sequencer or a pipeline sequencer, you most probably are in trouble, because since you are really centralized and you don't have that many inputs to access the input routes to access the rollup, then you might be in trouble. However, on the distributed sequencer, since you are starting to be decentralized, if you are decentralized enough in the sense that you don't have maybe 8, 12 nodes, but you have thousands of nodes and sequencers that are synced and talking together, it may be unfeasible to hijack and to flood or RPC attack all these nodes at the same time. The case of routing attacks, either BGP hijacking or packet dropping, this is something that if you are targeted in this way, your script, you cannot do anything on any case. This is something that applies across the board on all the architecture sequencers. Regarding the during phase, flooding and resource exhaustion. This is a particular kind of attack that consists of either spamming relentlessly the network and or sending a particular kind of transaction, especially on ZK rollups, that are known to hijack, to being able to hijack the rollup. In this case, if you're running a standalone sequencer or a pipeline sequencer, you most probably will be able to halt the network. But if you have a distributed sequencer, then even in the case that you can flood most of them, maybe you won't be able to halt the network. Or in the ideal case that you are having a distributed sequencer with different kind of clients, maybe even different kind of implementations, maybe a transaction that hijacks the implementation in Python doesn't hijack or halts the implementation in Rust, which could be really cool in this case. For the high availability particular case, since we have another actor, if you remember, you have a coordinator, you have another attack vector, which is the replica divergence and coordination compromise. So instead of attacking the all n replicas of the single sequencer, you can try to attack the coordinator. So if the coordinator is malicious or is down or is not responsive, you can halt the network effectively. On the pipeline, and only in this particular case, we can also consider, or we can also find that we have an stage overload and prober saturation. Because even though the pipeline, you have this kind of fast finality and, well, near instance of finality, at the end of the day, it is a cascade system in the sense that if you are able to bring to a halt an actor inside the chain, you will halt the whole chain because you don't have any other route to route the transaction. And on the distributed sequencers, we have a new kind of attack, which can be consensus disruption and partitioning, which would mean that if you, for instance, can try to perform a civil attack overtaking the control of the network and causing consensus disruption and partitioning of the network. And regarding after the processing phase, we have studied the possibility of instead of attacking the L2 network, you can attack the L1 network by flooding the blob market, which is related to AP 4844. So here, instead of attacking the sequencers, you don't have anything to do with the sequencers. What you're trying to do here is to flood the blob market directly, so you are effectively attacking the L2 because L2's rely on this kind of blob market to post the data availability cheaply. So that's all the contributions that we have for this article, and let me present the conclusions. So we have proposed a taxonomy of the Ethereum rollup architectures based on the sequencer design, and we have found 3 different architectures: standalone with the high availability variant, pipeline, and distributed. We have mapped attack surfaces across these 3 phases of the transaction workflow and together with the taxonomy of the first contribution. We have found that no single architecture simultaneously optimizes through throughput, decentralization, and resilience. And we have also found that centralized design dominate today because they are simple and more performant, but they come at the significant liveness and censorship risks. And we also found that distributed sequencers are promising, but face practical challenges in consensus design, in implementing the correct incentives to promote good behavior and MEV. So, security of L2's, and in particular on rollups, is still a largely open problem with high real world stakes. That's all from my side. Thank you for your attention, and happy to take questions.